I know, obviously, I know very well your involvement and my involvement too, I guess, with Bitcoin Uncensored. Did you do any other Bitcoin projects? Like, I know you were, I don't know how closely you were involved with Counterparty or helping with that, but like, did you do anything else in the Bitcoin world?
Other than buying Bitcoin, not really. But yeah, like I really didn't do any Bitcoin businesses for the reason that like I tend to think of Bitcoin as if Bitcoin is money, then all businesses eventually are going to be Bitcoin related or something like it. So I've always thought that like you can build general businesses and you can earn Bitcoin.
Yeah, a lot of people think that like there needs to be a Bitcoin version of every business, and that was how it was going to go down.
Right.
You are a businessman, though, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
you have definite relevance.
No, definitely. Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the fact that like Bitcoin literally is, if it is money, then all business is Bitcoin business. And I think the idea that like a business is a Bitcoin business. I mean, there are businesses absolutely that are related to Bitcoin specifically, but all businesses can be Bitcoin businesses.
Do you think there is an actual definition for a Bitcoin business?
Let's see. Is there? I mean, I think businesses related to the onboarding or offboarding of like Bitcoin stuff, like exchanges are obviously very specifically Bitcoin businesses. Wallets are clearly Bitcoin businesses. But again, a lot of Bitcoin quote businesses are very difficult to earn, to know how we're going to earn in. Like, I think wallets have always struggled with the question of like, we have users, but how do we earn money?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen some patterns with wallets with how they try to earn money, and definitely some repeat mistakes that they only really get away with because of bull markets.
Right. Which is really strange because like, wallets, they find it very difficult. I mean, like no wallets like take an output, for example, when you're sending Bitcoin, which, makes sense. But it does make it difficult to like, you know, have a wallet as a Bitcoin business purely. You're not making money. And that's the case with a lot of Bitcoin businesses, is that they really don't have a way to monetize. And I think that that's okay. But like generally, like in business, you build things in service of the business. So like you might build a wallet because you need your users to have it. Like Bitcoin ATMs might build a wallet. I know of some that have. But other than that, like, Bitcoin businesses, for the sake of business, it can be very difficult to like earn money in, which I think very well, right? Like I think Exotica was a Bitcoin business.
Yeah, I think there are like two different kinds of hard to earn money in Bitcoin. There's the kind that like, yeah, like with Exotica, like just hard to bootstrap and hard to get users, etc., like real users, hard, like just general hardness of making money.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like the hardness of finding a way to monetize that actually works or even makes sense for a lot of Bitcoin projects as well. And I guess that's maybe a better term for them as a Bitcoin project rather than a Bitcoin business.
Right, yeah, and that was like Bitcoin Uncensored. I never really wanted us to make any money in it because I thought it compromised us, but also like the way in which most quote, blockchain businesses, I guess, make money is they often like advertise scams. That's how Coinbase is making money.
I think this is a good moment to talk about like specific Bitcoin businesses, and not like to talk shit about them, but like basically to like actually assess like how they have tried to handle this problem of monetization, and whether it's actually legitimate or likely. Like for example, like a good one to start with is probably Blockstream. Like from what I can tell, they found ways to make money through mining and by positioning like with finance products, and then they're kind of using that seemingly to maybe bootstrap their more risky products like liquid and things like this.
I think that there's a lot of problems with regard to business and developing a user base, particularly businesses that need a large user base to make money. So, for example, a wallet business attracting users to your specific wallet. I mean, there's just a lot of competition. So if you go look for Bitcoin wallets, there's all sorts of them. And, there's the ones that have been around for a very long time, like what's it, Airbits or whatever it's called, Paul Pui's wallet. And there's, the Coinbase wallet and all sorts of wallets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's very difficult to, to build a business that requires a large user base. And I think that fundamentally what happens in a business like Blockstream is that you have like a large number of competent people. I think that from what I've heard, Blockstream is not the best managed company. I think that Adam is not necessarily a great like manager of a business, right? As he's CEO now, I think Austin Hill, I think, was before. But what they've done is the result of the competence is that they're able to kind of go in there, look at what Bitcoin can do, and talk to people and build things that address an actual market. And in that way, they can be kind of first to market and the most trusted source for a lot of that stuff. So they can actually make money without having to attract large, numbers of users. And they don't have to really ask that. They don't have to. They don't have that trouble of starting from zero, if you will, and they can kind of continually innovate in that way. And the other thing is that a lot of them are they're longtime Bitcoin holders, so they probably don't necessarily even need the job. They're doing it for the passion. And Blockstream, it was very unclear when they started what they were going to do. I think that they've done a lot of cool things. They've been able to, as a result of their competency, build a lot of business models that other companies are already building. So, for example, I think now they're offering mining. You can buy a mining rig from them and they can host it. And I'm sure they probably outsource a lot of this. They're probably like a layer for somebody else. I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that that's a business that I would trust them with, right? I would trust a bunch of these Blockstream guys to do what I think we kind of would have previously called a cloud mining on my behalf, because I know that their reputation is very different than like other companies that have previously done this. So that's the result of like taking people in that have large amounts of competency. And it's very different than like a lot of these wallets, which are people who are just kind of building wallets because they know we need them and they think that they're just going to get a lot of users. Kind of a build it, if you build it, they will come kind of mentality.
They're a good example because I think that like they're a good role model in general for Bitcoin businesses and Bitcoin entrepreneurs to look at.
I think that's true, but I don't know how many companies can be like Blockstream, right? Blockstream, like Bitcoin has the most competent core developers, I believe, of any of these projects in the space. And I think Blockstream kind of has a monopoly on them in terms of, these programmers willing to work for them. And then you have, people that are going off and sort of developing their own stuff who are also very competent. A good example is, the Strike wallet. I don't know if you've used that on Lightning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't think
that's built by Jack Mahler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people in Bitcoin will be familiar with Strike. I think that they're doing really well. I think they're showing the kind of adding Bitcoin to finance with a good user experience direction.
Well, they're also doing the thing I think that we dreamed about long ago, which is that you can use Strike and like it's Venmo, and people don't even know that they're using Strike or that they're using Bitcoin necessarily, unless they're sending that money to like a Lightning wallet or something like that. And I think that's pretty amazing, because we've talked about that for a long time, but we've never really seen it put in practice.
Yeah, I think Strike is cool. I think it's definitely a necessary user experience kind of use case that needs to be solved. Or I guess they are solving it, but that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And then Blockstream is like, I wanted to address your comment as far as like, there's not room for more than one Blockstream. I don't think that like there would ever be like a actual clone of Blockstream. It's actually a fairly diverse company as far as what they do, like having core developers working on the protocol, also making like mining products and layers and all these different things they work on. But I do think that like, as far as like me referring to them as a role model, I just mean just like navigating being a business in this industry. Like they diversified, they found some things that worked and made money, they stuck to some things that they care about the most, this kind of thing. But I also wanted to segue to Lightning Labs, because like I think anybody would define them as a Bitcoin business. They're not a nonprofit, but they do almost solely, as far as I know, work on open source software for a protocol. And so,
yeah,
like, what do you think?
I guess
about
that is
that?
very
like,
much.
like,
Yeah,
how
no,
are they going to
that
make
very
money?
much. That very much is the Blockstream model. Now that you mention it, that's true. And I don't know. I mean, like, maybe they'll provide liquidity on Lightning. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that we're going to see with Lightning. I mean, Lightning. Have you played with it at all?
Of course, yeah. Well, and they literally do provide liquidity on Lightning through their latest product. It's called Pool. It's sort of like a,
There you go.
I don't know if I want to call it decentralized way of selling. It's a decentralized way of pooling people into a central area to sell channels. And so that they're working on. I don't know how successful it's been as far as usage and uptake, but that is like one of their latest products.
Well, I think Lightning is slow on the uptake right now, and so I'm sure that a lot of those revenue sources for them are kind of things that they foresee as being profit centers, but they're just stuff that isn't. Lightning's just not ready yet. It's not ready even slightly. We're getting closer.
What do you think is not ready about Lightning?
Well, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems that Lightning hasn't quite addressed yet with regard to, I don't know, I think the penalty of like maybe of broadcasting an old state, for example. One of the people gets to take all the money. I think that's a lot of that stuff is going to have to be sussed out and changed and modified, and we're going to have to find out how to like do this. But like, I mean, the fear of running a node is, I think that anyone who's running a Lightning node, if they have like substantial money on it, should be suffering from a sort of node anxiety. You don't want your node to go down and to come back online incorrectly. And I think that like it's clearly a beta product. There's a lot of small issues with it that need to, and none of them are like deal breakers, but they need to be fleshed out. And so anything that you're building on Lightning right now, I think is very much subject to its sort of current nascent state. It's not ready, right? It's not ready for prime time. And I'm amazed at the uptake that it has for a product that's essentially in beta.
I see it a little bit differently. Like you're saying it's not ready, but I think you kind of mean it maybe in two ways, or at least more than one way. Like it's not ready as far as like at the protocol level, where you think that the actual design might not be ready. Like you mentioned the penalty thing, and that's a pretty fundamental aspect of the design, and it's not going to change until we get I think the CTV soft fork, which will probably won't be anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. I was talking to someone today about one of the issues, or if you open a channel without enough of a fee, you can have real problems trying to close that channel later on. And I'm not exactly like I'm literally just getting my Lightning node up and running right now to start playing with it. But there are definite issues with Lightning on all sorts of fronts. But sorry, I'll let you continue. But I just think that like the problems that we're seeing, I'm excited to watch them get worked out. But yeah, they're not going to be fixed until we have substantial users actually working out. But a lot of these do not affect the users necessarily. They affect like the node operators, which is a very different.
Now I'm going to take that as a segue, because I don't disagree with you. But I think of it a little bit differently, and maybe you can keep this in mind as you continue your Lightning journey. Because what I've come to learn after digging into it is I actually think we're making the same mistake with Lightning that we made with Bitcoin, where we were like, oh, it does this and it does that and it's going to fix this and it's going to kill shitcoins, and like we just think it has all these magic properties, because it is cool, and we're kind of projecting what all these things that might be possible mixed with our ignorance of what it is actually possible. And I think that what I've learned is that you mentioned node operators. I think that Lightning is not for users. I think that Bitcoin is Lightning is for businesses. And obviously that means it's for like end users too, because they connect to the businesses. But I think the people running Lightning and caring about it and even knowing it exists need to be the businesses, not the users. And like you mentioned Strike, and they're a good example, but I kind of mean like the flip side of Strike, where Strike is masking like literally everything from you, and you just pay, and that should be the way it is. But we also like have situations where like you need to cue the user to be able to do things on Lightning that are more complicated than that, and those need to be addressed in user experiences that aren't currently. So it's more of an app level, not ready for Lightning, in my opinion. So I think that like on a protocol level, a lot of it is pretty much ready, like, yeah, there's some things that are bugs and some things that could be optimized, but like you can hook in a wallet to an exchange to a user, and you can make a whole little network and pay everybody, and it all works just fine. So the user experience aspect is like at the app level, and I don't know that Lightning Labs is even going to attempt to solve that, or any of the or Blockstream either. Well, Blockstream does have some apps, but none of them have Lightning in them.
It's true.
So like, it's I think it's something that's like at the network level, and it'll be solved and treated more like, having cell phone minutes, or there'd be some kind of user experience for handling it. And I think you'll find that like it's not, I don't know that users are meant to at least know that they're running a Lightning node. In the mobile apps, you can get Neutrino in there, and so you can have this lightweight node that works. Um, but even that is tricky to install in apps, and not widely supported, etc. I don't know. I'm ranting a little bit, but yeah, I don't disagree with you. I just think that I guess that the side of the question that we didn't talk about so much with Lightning Labs is like, I do think they have a challenge to try to figure out how to make money. And yeah, they have this pool product, but it is a decentralized product, and anybody could run it and run their own pool. And so they're just, everything they make, has their own competition built right in as well.
I'm excited to see where Lightning Labs goes, and a number of these other Lightning protocol type, or these other Lightning apps that are being built. I'm amazed at the progress of Lightning. I think that a lot of people think it's slow. I don't think it is. I think it's been amazing. I hear people critique the uptake of it, but I know that people who are running Lightning nodes are making more and more money sitting in between transactions every year. And I think it's just a really neat it's an amazing addition to Bitcoin. I think what I realized about like the limited block space of Bitcoin is that it sort of forced a going to the moon like moment in the space, where we had to figure out ways around these, perceived problems, like the fact that not enough people can interact on main chain, as people were saying. How do you solve that problem? Well, there's this really amazing function in Bitcoin that allows us to like basically open these channels and net. And I think that was a really amazing sort of proposal, and the implementation. You're correct. It is a business protocol of sorts. The implementation is functional and simple and really incredible.
On the business side, I also, what I mean is like the quality is basically that I think Lightning brings to Bitcoin is it obviously allows you to do instant transacting, which is, relatively instant, which is pretty new to Bitcoin without zero conf. And then it allows you to have high frequency, so you don't have to pay fees if you know you're going to do a lot of payments. And high frequency payments are typically only happening in business, right? And then the last thing it does is it adds centralization to Bitcoin. It lets you have centralization safely, because the user holds the keys, and the worst thing that can happen is the channel closes and they have to wait for the settlement. And so basically there's only the nuisance factor. And so I think those are the three qualities it brings, like centralization, high frequency, and instant. Like these are very, very retail friendly, kind of business friendly qualities.
Oh yeah. Well, the instant payments, to me, I've always said this, people have been building these coins to address Bitcoin's 10-minute block time, which I think is hilarious in and of itself. But no one seems to really realize that the only thing that really matters, the only speed that matters is 0 seconds, right? If you can't get payments down to 0, then 10 minutes is as good as 2 minutes, Like if you have credit card payments for a business,
I definitely agree with this.
Yeah, if you have credit card payments for a business, you're getting settlement. You're netting, once every 24 hours, or once every, maybe you're getting the payments 3 days after they've been put into your Stripe account or something like that. And I think that's generally fine. Businesses operate on that. There's a lot of ways you can mitigate it if you need the money right now. You can get, high interest, factored loans or something like that. But, Lightning brings these payment speeds essentially to the speed of cash, right? The sort of the 0 time transaction, which is amazing. And it's really cool that you can do that on Bitcoin, because we didn't think you could, a few years ago. We thought that you needed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 confirmations. And with Lightning, you can essentially, just sit there and take money at the speed of Lightning. It's very, very fast.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point with pointing out that like there's no difference between 2 minutes and 10 minutes. This is one thing that actually frustrates me about Liquid, is that like I think it's 2-minute block times or something, and it's just like, why isn't it shorter? Like if they had the chance to design it themselves, like why isn't it shorter? And my guess is they're going to tell me it's for technical reasons, which is just going to be that like I'm like, okay, like, go back to my belief that I don't think that sidechains are a real thing or a way to scale Bitcoin.
Well, I think that sidechains are a way to experiment on Bitcoin. I do think that sidechains could be a way to scale Bitcoin, right? Like you could make them 1 second or something like that, but essentially sidechains I think are mostly for experimentation. Paul Storks talks all about sidechains being a way to kill shitcoins, but I don't think that I don't think that application really exists, because the true application of shitcoins is for founders to get rich by printing their own money. And if you suddenly tie these things to Bitcoin, like there's no actual reason to have a shitcoin.
I totally agree.
And that's the thing about it. Like it's just, I've talked to him about this before. There's, if you have a like dark coin or something like that running on Bitcoin, that's cute and all, but unless that functionality is actually added to the main Bitcoin protocol, it doesn't really matter. Like the reason that he started Darkcoin wasn't to have a $50,000 Darkcoin. It was to start at zero and get a bunch of people on and to buy it and to make money on this thing. It doesn't serve that application, so there would be no reason it would be on a sidechain.
Yeah, what I think Paul and some people sometimes don't understand is that like you can't solve the quote unquote problem, quote unquote, of shitcoins, by adding something to Bitcoin or doing something on Bitcoin, because the whole point of shitcoins is to be not Bitcoins. And so like drive chain, et cetera, you can't like fix this altcoin problem. The altcoin problem is that people want an alternative and they want to speculate on an alternative, and they want narratives to be the reason that drives that speculation.
But I do think there's some interesting stuff like Rootstock bringing the EVM to Bitcoin. I mean, like, go ahead. I think that'll be an interesting thing. That does kind of remove a lot of the claims about like Ethereum, right?
Yeah, I will fully disclaim like ignorance on Rootstock at the moment. Like I remember like we probably both researched it at some point, back in 2016 or 2015 or whatever. But like I haven't done it lately. But I really feel like, I remember the last bull market, they resurfaced and they did an ICO, and now they have 2 tokens or something. And now this bull market, I really feel like it's just the bull market that revived them, and I don't really think there's actually real hype or interest there for what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean that could very well be, but I'd be curious. I'd be curious to look at it, because I don't know if they've actually got the EVM functioning on it or not, or what the state of that project is. But I do know that it seems to be back, and they, but I'd be very curious. Like if we do have a widely used EVM on Bitcoin, or one that is easily accessible, like it kills a lot of the propositions that Ethereum makes. I don't think it's necessarily any more useful on Bitcoin. But it is an interesting prospect to be able to point to it and say to people, you can do that on Ethereum, but like you can do it just as easily in Bitcoin with exactly the same language.
I have a feeling that a lot of the actual interesting things, like the closest to being realistically interesting things that are happening on shitcoins and supposedly not on Bitcoin, I actually think they're going to be like discovered as decentralized web tech first. Like in other words, it'll just be a matter of like integrating Bitcoin in this way with peers intentionally, and you'll be able to do like the cool shitcoin stuff. Like not best example, but like we have like DLCs, for example, and these are just a different way of doing smart contracts. But like you have like, we don't have this on chain, so there are different challenges for kind of coordinating using this.
This is the Brave browser problem, I would say, right? Like Brave browser could have been a very cool product where you were tipping people in Bitcoin all over the internet.
Yeah.
Instead, they released their own token. But I agree, like there are neat applications out there that people have built with shitcoins that they could easily throw Bitcoin on, but they don't. And I actually think that represents like a pretty good opportunity for Bitcoiners. Like if the Brave browser provides value, people think it does, then I think like particularly as Lightning gets underway, I think it's a little hard to give people these small tips when, you have to pay 40 cents or 60 cents to have an on to get anything through on chain. And right now, like even that is a suspect as to whether like a transaction will be mined at that rate.
And that'll eventually like leak into Lightning too, because Lightning transactions will just be cheaper than Bitcoin transactions, but not necessarily cheap, you know?
Yeah, I don't think they'll be free by any means, but I do think that they'll be cheap enough that you could actually send a 30 cent or 40 cent tip to somebody, and that would be great. I do think that a lot of the applications that I hear people like Elizabeth Stark talk about, like streaming payments for workers, are absolutely inane, very stupid, and I don't think that those applications, I don't know. I tend to be very critical of libertarians. I tend to think that they have some of the dumbest ideas, and that's one of them. Like workers getting paid on a 2-week time span, or like every second that they're working. It's really not that different. And I don't care what anybody tells you. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, you would basically, to get paid in streaming, you would need your work to basically be like super, super important and dangerous, I'm guessing. Like that's the only reason you would want to be paid immediately, right? Like
Maybe, but even then, like even if it was dangerous, like we have direct deposit. So if you die on Thursday because you were doing something, cleaning windows on a skyscraper, you're still going to get money in your bank account to the date that you work.
Yeah.
Just happen on Friday, a week from the day that you die.
I think that streaming payments is going to only be interesting wherever streaming data is interesting. So like
that's what I think too.
Yeah, if you're streaming, if you need a live feed to something, then it's okay to pay for it in a streaming. But ultimately, everything in reality is at a sample rate. Like you can only witness something in a moment, whether it's digitally, as a human eye, or whatever. Everything's at a sample rate. So you're just talking about how frequent you are doing a sample rate.
Correct, and that's that's the thing. Like, is the frequency, I guess you might call it payment resolution. Is the resolution of payments at what point does that become important? And do workers need to be paid every 2 weeks, or do they need to be paid every 4.5 minutes? A lot of these questions are very stupid, and Lightning doesn't necessarily solve them, nor make the stupid questions more interesting. Like
there's also like, will I even like that? Like, do I
right?
Like, how will that feel to like actually be on the clock? Like,
yeah, and it's just it's a very weird problem, and I think that people are in Bitcoin and in shitcoins generally, they've always been very obsessed with settlement times, right? So 10 minutes is too long for a lot of people. Banks take a day or two sometimes to do things. The reason that these settlement times exist is so that you can find mistakes. A good example, if you have employees working, let's say someone forgets to clock out, but you don't want to pay them for those 3 hours on a streaming payment, right? You want to be able to correct that before payroll goes out. And that's why companies do that. That's why they have, they make adjustments before payroll goes out. And they need the time. And it doesn't, a lot of these problems that I hear people saying Lightning solves are very wrong. There's no reason to solve it like that. Paying for a cup of coffee, on the other hand, you can do that with Lightning. That's kind of cool.
I guess in the end, the amount of the optimal amount of action is the fewest amount of actions, right? So like, you always want to try to batch or optimize something if you can, regardless of the format.
Well, netting isn't any less efficient because Lightning, right? Like we as people, as businesses, you want to net. Netting is an important feature, and Lightning makes the ability to net a little bit faster, quite a bit cheaper. All of that's good, but you want to net. You don't want to necessarily be doing things like sending 12 cents every second.
Yeah. All right. What do you think about Counterparty? Do you still follow that at all?
Yeah, especially during the NFT boom, Counterparty has been very interesting to me. The NFT stuff is interesting, only insofar as I don't think anybody really knows what they are, and I think in Counterparty, because of the rare Pepe stuff, people have been thinking about what NFTs are for a very long time, and I think that the NFTs really work well when the NFT itself is like a database object, right? So like Magic the Gathering cards might be a really good application for NFTs, but I don't think that it makes a lot of sense or is very interesting when applied to a piece of art.
I agree.
As a digital receipt. I find that to be very dumb. And, it's sort of art DRM. if you will. Like, what are they going to do?
Well, it's not even bad as art DRM. Like, even though it's not, just because something is not like easy to enforce doesn't make it useless. But like,
correct.
Most of them aren't even that. Like, and NFTs are usually just like metadata pointing to a link somewhere.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. Like, if you have if you bought the Beeple, right, the one that was at Christie's for what, $60 million, and you're like, I own this Beeple. How do I know you own it? Well, I have the digital receipt. So what do you do with this Beeple? I don't know. You put it on display at your house somehow. You put it on your TV. Well, if I have access to that file, I too can put it on my TV. I can put it on there in exactly the same way.
Well, the question would be, do I actually own any rights? Like, do I get to own the painting, like, and so I can like license it to let somebody put it on their book cover, for example?
You probably, well, no, because you don't even own the copyright, right? The artist retains copyright of their art. Bullshit. So like what you do is, I don't know, I think the only real thing it gives you is the conference of the idea that you own it. So like if a museum wanted to display it, they might have to ask you first in some weird formality. And you could say, yes, I'll lend it to you. And then, I don't know, you have to take it off of your TV while they have it also. But if I download the file and I put it on my TV, my having it on my TV doesn't diminish your ownership at all. And we have equally valid copies of exactly the same thing. So you can own it. You might be the one who holds the receipt, but I have exactly the same thing in my house. And I can get exactly the same experience, which is very different than like owning the Mona Lisa or owning a counterfeit Mona Lisa.
Yeah. So and this is something I've been thinking about recently, and I just said it in a podcast a few days ago, but like, I think what NFTs are and what people are not really fully understanding that they need to be is like metadata objects. Like, they basically are, you need a way for creating and enforcing like a network of people that define this key as something else, right? Like, it's like, because you can't, the something else isn't in the key. It simply isn't. And so like the key is just like a credential. And actually, no, the NFT is actually a credential. And so like the people, your key is just your ability to prove that credential. And all NFTs try to do is take that credential and make it into a bearer instrument, because for some reason, giving credentials requires bearer instruments. I don't know. But the truth is, like, they could do the same thing. Like, if just for the art use case, even if it included rights, they could do the same thing just by using like any key pair, signing a message to another key pair, and that's it.
Right. Or, well, even more than that, like what, if I were a Christie's and I saw this, I'd be like, what we could do is we could build a database of provenance where, like, if you want to sell digital works, then you can buy the digital work and we will record in the Christie's database, that this person owns this work. And then when that person wants to sell the work, they can come to Christie's and they can be the only ones to do it. So like, if people are buying this digital art and owning digital art is an actual thing, which, I can at least acknowledge that there's some validity to that, then, there should be a centralized database that has all the owners of these things in some way. You don't necessarily have to even use your name. You could literally just, use PGP or something like that to prove that you're the person who has the right to sell it. But it doesn't need to be on a blockchain. That doesn't actually confer any rights or anything interesting.
Yeah. Agree.
I don't know. I mean, like, again, like, as database objects, I think it's interesting enough. Like, again, if you're playing a card game online or something like that, but generally these NFTs really do not confer anything to the end user. And it's kind of the same problem as the ICOs from the last boom. People were buying them as if they were equity, but they weren't equity, right?
I call them sentimental equity, basically.
Yeah, it's people were treating them like equity, but they weren't equity, and they were stated as not equity in all the documents and the white papers. And I always thought that was very interesting that people still treated them as equity and still bought them as if they were equity.
And they did the same thing with NFTs.
Yes. And that's what's really interesting about the space. I found that there's a lot of things about blockchain and Bitcoin that are very interesting to me. And one of those things is that we tend to smell, as humans, a hole in the universe. We know that there's something there. So like NFTs are an example of this. We know that there are that there could be some use cases for this NFT stuff, right? I'm giving a good example, I think, like the idea of like trading cards. Perfectly good use case. The reason it's a good use case is because digital trading cards are essentially bearer instruments, and blockchains are for bearer instruments, digital bearer instruments. And that's perfectly interesting, a very interesting thing. But the idea, this idea, before people have figured out what NFTs are for, they've smelled that there is some sort of use case here, and they've then extended it to things that it isn't useful for, such as art generally. And the fact that people are using it doesn't necessarily mean that it is interesting or useful for that purpose. And I find that to be sort of a difficult thing for people to realize, that like things can pop in value, but essentially what you're selling in this case is a receipt. They can pop in value. It doesn't make the market right. The market can be very wrong about what it's doing. And we see that all the time in Bitcoin, where the market is completely wrong about how this technology ought to be used. And yet people use it in that way for a while until it falls out of use because, people realize that it's kind of bullshit. Or in the case of the ICOs, a lot of these companies end up failing. And it's interesting because now we have a bull market, and there's no more ICOs. They're pretty much done. At least as conceptually. Maybe they'll return in the next bump.
Yeah, I think it's just a weird phenomenon where, like, when you're new here, you have this weird mix of ignorance and greed that allows you to basically like ignore things and gloss over things that the cues are there. Like, you could learn them if you dug in and actually paid attention a little bit and actually know what's going on. But you would more prefer to ignore them so you can have, believe that you have this opportunity to make money. And then people just kind of stay in that state for as long until they stop making money.
Right, and then they move on to the next thing. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with like a Christie's or Sotheby's. If they're jumping into these things, what are they going to think? Because I've talked to a couple of people there, and they're always saying that they're like researching this very exciting new art, stuff. And I'm trying to figure out what they're going to discover, because when you take, it's sort of an emperor has no clothes situation. And are we just going to pretend for the next 10 years that NFTs are things? In the way that we're saying they're things, or are we going to ever discover that, they're not? Does it happen at some point?
I think it'll depend on how well it actually sticks as a narrative for raising money through the bear market. Like, if I can keep raising money for my shitcoin company by saying I'm building an NFT platform or revolutionizing NFTs, then it'll be around for the next bull market. But if I can't do that, then it won't, because it's just going to be like a retired narrative,
Meanwhile, I see companies like Masterworks.io, which allow you to buy fractional shares of art pieces, and they do it in a full-fledged database. No shitcoin, nothing.
Yeah. Totally incidentally, like, I actually had a call. I don't know why they asked me or why they wanted my opinion, but like, I had somebody like a gallery like Christie's. I recently had a meeting, a call with them, because they wanted to get my thoughts on NFTs and how I thought they should do it and such. And I'll tell you what the result is. I'm pretty sure what they're doing is building an NFT platform for Ethereum. And so like I even had the chance. So I literally had the chance to tell a gallery, like, you can just use any key pair and sign a message to somebody else's key and keep it data. Like the example you just gave, I literally like gave it to them and I said, look, if you wanted to do like the total Chad kind of, aristocratic kind of move and actually do it like how I think Christie's should do it, it would be to have this formal like white glove thing where you're like having high security for the keys and how you generated the keys, and you would prove that like this is now the Christie's key, and you would sign a message to the like buyer and you would give him a printed copy of what was encoded in the message, and you would frame it and everybody would see it and make news, and there would be nothing to do with blockchain.
They could absolutely build any of these platforms and, actually make some money. There's a giant hole in the market. And it's funny to me that solution has been around for, I don't know, 50 years. Not 50, but probably 30, 40 years, essentially since PGP. I don't know when PGP was developed, but you could have done something like this that long ago. And yet they're pretending like, well, they're not pretending. They truly believe that this is a new innovation that has recently been come up with. And it's not. It's just something that is, the word blockchain's involved, so they think it couldn't have been developed in any other way.
The same thing happens when people get into shitcoins and they hear about all the narratives. They don't actually realize that a lot of those narratives are like narratives from the past 2 decades from people trying to build the internet. And like
Correct.
they're just like things that people have always wanted people to do in the internet, but they don't for some reason, or they've never been designed well or finished. And now shitcoiners are going to claim to finish them, and that's it.
Well, this is the thing I've always said about the blockchain stuff is if you listen to pitches about blockchain, what you end up with is a realization that oftentimes the word blockchain is substituted for this idea of human coordination. So if you have blockchain, then you don't need human coordination, right? And and blockchain doesn't really solve that problem. Blockchain doesn't solve the problem of human coordination. You still need people to do things. So, the key pair signing that you're discussing, the reason it hasn't been developed is because someone would have to develop it. And now that we have blockchain, the fact that you could develop it doesn't go away. But now they think it has, essentially been developed because blockchain exists. And blockchain doesn't even really facilitate it or make it easier. It's just that someone else has done this and made it easy for them to do. And I feel like given that fact, there actually would have been possibly a way that Christie's could have developed this in the 90s and made a ton of money in the meantime selling digital artwork. And I wonder if that's true. I wonder what would have happened if they had done that back then.
I bet we could find this in the wild if we actually looked, that it already
I bet you it does exist. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? But again, the provenance thing in that sort of environment is a little bit difficult, right? Like, what if I want to do a private sale of a piece of art? Now, in a world where you do the key pair stuff, you could transfer it by going and, signing and giving it to this person. But if you forget to do that, does that person now not own the art? Do they not own the ability to sell?
Or if the person loses the
auction?
proof, do they not own the art?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And this has been my question about Ethereum. Like, if you don't transfer the rights, let's say of a physical piece, like people say you could, tie one of these receipts to a physical piece. If you have the physical piece and you don't sign off that you sold it, does that person not own it? Do you own it still? Because it just seems to me that the mess of provenance is in the fact that like paintings move, art moves all the time. And
because they're really talking about trust and whether or not, and basically substitute witnesses. That's all.
And it's going to move regardless of the token.
All right, let's move on. I think we should talk about maybe Bitcoin Uncensored and more specifically Bitcoin Maximalism a little bit.
Sure.
And let's see if we can try to put it through the lens of business. I don't really know what that means or what that would look like, but so much as like I don't know, maybe do you think Bitcoin maximalism is good for business?
Bitcoin max. Yeah, I do. And I would say it's good for business because it moves you towards a consistency of direction, but also it means that as a business operator, you don't have to kind of be up on the latest trends, if you will. You can focus on building your business. I think that it's actually really dangerous for businesses to become obsessed with cryptocurrency. And I think we've seen this a lot where businesses come into the space and the first thing they do is, spend a lot of time trying to research exactly what they should do. And what they ultimately end up on is, Ethereum or, Dash or something else. And they'll try that for a while. And then eventually they make their way to something else and then something else and then something else and then Bitcoin. And I think that's a giant waste for businesses to like spend all of the time and money to develop all of these different types of, platforms or on all of, because what businesses really are in the business of is making money. So if, not a Bitcoin business necessarily, let's say you're building a business selling food, if you're trying to focus on any crypto at all, like you're going to waste a lot of time trying to just, market your business and build your business. That said, I would say that a lot of the stuff, no one spends their coins right now anyways. I tend to be a believer in the idea that like, if you're a business, you probably shouldn't focus on the space at all. If you're not like directly in Bitcoin, if you're not an exchange, businesses should be in the business of making money. And then if the owners, when they get their dividends, want to invest in Bitcoin, more power to them. And I think that's the best way for businesses to focus on this space is to have a founder maybe that really likes Bitcoin, to watch it closely, and then to just not really participate in the business aspects of Bitcoin. Bitcoin as money eventually will make it into your business if it works as money.
Yeah, I would agree with most of that. I would say that like there is a little bit of a flip side where probably, and I only would really appreciate this because I worked at BitRefill, but probably a business should just be currency agnostic for the most part and just accept whatever form of payment they can actually parse through their own business system, which may include adding payment processors.
Well, if a payment processor takes Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum or Cardano or any of these others, like if you're a business and you're getting the cash in your bank account as fiat, you're going to be ambivalent as to what people pay in.
Yeah, because you can always buy Bitcoin with whatever they paid you in anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you want.
And that's what I'm saying is like what you want as a business really is just you want to not have to think about the payment process at all. You want to receive fiat. You want that to go into your bank account, and then you want to be able to extract that as dividends or as payroll or whatever. So it's really dumb for businesses unless they're Bitcoin businesses to really focus on that. And Genix or whatever the companies that does a credit card processing, if they add a way to pay with Bitcoin, then that's great. And you as a business, all you have to do is turn it on. But there's been a lot of studies, particularly with e-commerce. I don't remember which company it was, but many years ago, like probably 7 or 8, there was a company that added Bitcoin processing to their checkout, and it lowered their checkout percentage because people had another option to pay.
Yeah, and
that's not good. You really want businesses to businesses want as many customers as they can possibly get going through that checkout process and finishing it and putting in their credit card number or their ACH or whatever it is that they want. And they just want the money. So to add Bitcoin because, out of principle or something like that, especially if it hurts your business, that's in my opinion, a violation of your fiduciary duty as a business owner.
But what about like the concept of like, we have hyper Bitcoinization, which I the way I interpret that is basically like circular economy, in which my definition of that, or I think the actual definition of that, is something basically about like removing as much conversion as possible, reducing the amount of friction, having the least amount of points between nodes, etc. Like circular economy is about efficiency and removing conversion. And so if you are somebody that like subscribes to, hyper Bitcoinization or the concept of a circular economy for Bitcoin, you probably want to be part of some kind of movement towards Bitcoin businesses that only use Bitcoin and don't accept all the things because all the things are an inefficiency.
Yeah, except that businesses again are trying to receive fiat. So,
well, that's an assumption. I definitely think there are starting to be businesses that do want to accumulate Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I think it's different when you put it like maybe in your treasury, right? Like some of the, MSTR or, Tesla talking about it now. Other companies probably going to do that.
Yeah, I don't think people are using Bitcoin for their overhead. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that most businesses really want fiat for the most part. And, if you want to make an ideological statement with your business, I mean, that's the business owner's prerogative. But I do think that like businesses really have an obligation just to accept fiat or to get money into fiat. And then the business owners themselves or the business employees or whoever, they can do whatever they want with their money. If they want to invest in crypto, they can. If they want to invest in gold, because they're gold bugs, they can. If they want to invest in silver, they can. If they want to put it into equities, they can. And I think that it's incumbent on businesses to operate in a normal environment with something very stable. I think Bitcoin adds a layer of risk to business that isn't necessarily what they should be taking on as businesses. As an individual, I think it's a very different question, but as a business, that's just not, to me, the risk of like a highly volatile asset being added to your,
I want to nitpick and say, I don't know if it adds risk so much as changes the risk profile in a way they may not know how to handle.
It definitely adds risk though. Cause volatility is risk. In the markets. I think there are people that disagree with me on that, but that tends to be the sort of accepted definition. Volatility is
I think
risk.
this goes into the sample rate thing. Like I think everything has the risk, and it's just like how big and how often it will happen, particularly with money. Like what will happen with your fiat is suddenly in 2020 they'll print, half the money supply. Like that's the risk.
Yeah, but businesses are generally not, they're not there to, like, I don't think that businesses should be accepting, big currency risk as a part of their portfolio. And like, maybe your thesis is that it's not risky because like it's less risky than holding US dollars. I tend not to subscribe to that.
No. My thesis is not that my argument is that it's not more risky. It's just different risky.
It's absolutely more risky than fiat, though. It's just much more volatile.
Yeah.
And if volatility is risk, like, you are adding a dimension of risk to your business.
But fiat has volatility as well. It's just on a different sample.
It's just very minor. It's very minor.
It's not volatility. Minor, like the past year, it's been huge.
It's not. It's been within like 6%.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to get a conversation about how we measure inflation, but I would prefer to measure by the money supply. That's how I would measure.
Yeah, I don't measure inflation that way. I measure it.
I understand that there's a delay to the effect, but in the end, that's the truth of it. And even that, we don't know is true. It's probably worse than that.
I'm guessing that the U.S. over the next, I mean, we'll see. But per my very sober view on things, I tend to think that we're probably going to have a lot of deflation this year. And in spite of the money printing and in spite of the Fed lowering the reserve ratio. So, if I'm right, even if I'm wrong, like let's say that there is a lot of volatility this year in the value of your currency, we're still talking within a few percentage points, whereas Bitcoin fluctuates. The other day, it dropped 40%, something like that, 35%. It's huge. The volatility in Bitcoin is very big, and that just adds a completely new risk dimension to business. And if you're a Bitcoin business, that's one thing. Like, you're taking on Bitcoin, you need a certain inventory of Bitcoin, whatever the case is. If you're a Bitcoin ATM, that's the bit. You're literally the business that you're operating in is the business of volatility. But if you're just like selling, I don't know, donuts, you're not. That's not a risk that you should be taking on.
Maybe I'm packaging it wrong. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say that like. You can choose any configuration and achieve the same risk exposure if you design it properly. Like you can hold your Bitcoin and then do futures shorts or something to make it stable to whatever degree of stability you want to offset whatever amount of volatility you want. And it could be totally stable or a little bit within 1%. Like you can have whatever you want if you configure it. And so the point is, the reason why I'm framing it this way is because if you think this way, then it makes you choose like it makes you actually think about what your actual risk choices are and what you really think about the risk of having your money in fiat. Because there are different risks, like that it's typically going to be held in a bank, and what risks of you being able to access that money someday when if you might not have total access, the money printing, etc. There are real risks, and you could design yourself into a situation where you have less exposure to them.
Yeah.
Well, less exposure to some instead of others. True. Basically, you can rearrange things however you want.
Yeah, you can absolutely rearrange your risks. But for me, the business question is whether businesses themselves should be like putting their money into Bitcoin or accepting Bitcoin. I mean, I just tend to think that fiat is the more responsible alternative right now in this era, and that you as a business owner can take on different risks personally than I think your business should.
Well, I'll agree in this way. I'll say, if your specialty is not something to do with Bitcoin or risk or finance,
or trading,
then don't do those things. Outsource them to people you trust, or just don't get involved with them.
Yeah, I mean, like what you're talking about is a fairly sophisticated set of trades, and like if you're a business owner, that's probably not what you're focused on.
Yeah, you would end up outsourcing that to someone else too, and trusting them.
Yeah,
anyway.
You'd have to trust them. Yeah, it really is a different set of risks. Like I said, if you're selling donuts, you want to sell donuts for cash, and you want that cash. And then again, if you want, you can, take your salary or your dividends, and you can buy Bitcoin.
So what do you think Bitcoin Uncensored would be like if it happened this year?
Oh man, We'd probably be making a lot of fun of the NFTs. We'd probably be making a lot of fun of these DeFi projects. We'd be focusing a lot on, like, I hear a lot of these DeFi projects are pretty scammy, very obviously Ponzi scheme.
Oh, we have Elon now.
Elon's here. I'd probably be laughing at Elon.
Imagine Elon on Bitcoin Uncensored. That would have been so much better than SNL.
I mean, Elon would never have come on.
No.
Well, but, maybe. Yeah. The Elon thing would have been interesting because I think we would have probably done 2 shows. The first one would have been that Tesla's accepting Bitcoin. We probably would have diagnosed it correctly. We would have said no one's going to buy a car with Bitcoin, and very soon he'll probably get back out of Bitcoin, and we would have been right, 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
It was very funny. Elon coming into Bitcoin, Bitcoiners, I was surprised by the reaction to it because they were so happy. And I think that people don't remember the history of all of these guys. Every single person that comes into Bitcoin and begins selling things for Bitcoin very quickly has a realization that nobody uses Bitcoin, and at least not for purchases of that sort or of that magnitude. Like, this was my realization at the Bitcoin Bowl, if you remember that. Mm-hmm. We went to the Bitcoin Bowl.
Oh, I wanted to bring this up because I don't know if you noticed, but like we've had a series over the years of people that have like sponsored things with Bitcoin, and made big like Super Bowl ads or whatever. And you're bringing up the Bitcoin Bowl, which I believe was BitPay. And recently we had Strike, who you also mentioned. They sponsored an Indy race car again, and I was just like, oh man, this is like feeling very dangerous.
Yep. Yeah, it's a misuse of money, I think, especially.
There were so many top signs in hindsight,
And but the Bitcoin Bowl was interesting because they had arranged for this one taxi driver to begin accepting Bitcoin, and you had this large concentration of Bitcoiners. BitPay tweeted about him. Everybody was talking. There were articles written about this taxi driver. We took the taxi at we called that taxi driver, and we had him come pick us up at around 1 a.m. Basically, the last trip that this taxi driver took. And we asked him. We said, "So, did anybody pay in Bitcoin today?" The whole day, tons of Bitcoiners. He said zero people paid with Bitcoin that entire day. Not one.
Awesome.
And I remember, like, we went back to the hotel and we were looking at each other like, what the fuck is happening? Like, how is it that you have the most Bitcoiners here and nobody, not one person, was willing to spend? And this was, this is in a world where everybody was so excited. I mean, I've seen this. The shitcoins do it too now. They get really excited when, like, some little piddly vendor somewhere starts accepting their shitcoin. And what I know is that nobody spends that shitcoin at that vendor ever. And that's always going to be the case for a long time until people feel comfortable, like they have maybe some like a lot of the growth maybe is squeezed out of this. But I could have told you that Elon opened it up for Bitcoiners. I bet he sold 1.5 cars to Bitcoiners, to a Bitcoiner. I'll bet almost nobody used Bitcoin to pay for them. And 2 weeks later, they pulled the plug. And he pulled it with a fair amount of resentment, which I thought was interesting. The amount of resentment he acquired in those 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think what the resentment was paired with that, like, he was on his little kind of Dogecoin adventure, and he didn't like that, like, basically Bitcoiners were making fun of him the whole time, mm-hmm. and so he wanted his Dogecoin adventure to be like pure and true and novel, and Bitcoiners just kept wanting to shit on him for it, which I think he deserved. But
I agree.
So yeah, Bitcoin Uncensored, like I don't know if it's like still got the same mystique that it had a couple of years ago. Like, people always talked about it, say, oh, you got to go watch it. I kind of wonder what the new crop of Bitcoiners is, if they're getting exposed.
No, they haven't heard about it.
Well, hopefully this will help. I'm not very famous, but some people will hear this and hopefully go back and listen. You guys should, if you're listening. Bitcoin Uncensored. I think the whole anthology is still on YouTube. Was
I think Chris took them down, but like
Oh,
I
did
think
he?
there's stuff. Yeah, you can find it. I think that there's a couple people talking about hosting it. So I think that soon you'll be able to find it in places.
We can make
But
a version of the Biz website where we put it all up there and people have to pay for it.
that's true as well. But yeah, like I think that a lot of the new guys haven't heard of Bitcoin Uncensored. They don't know what it is. And it's funny because a lot of the stuff, like I'll be in these rooms and I'll hear arguments that, I created being told to me about these things. And I think it's very funny. Just because it really was sort of the cultural pivot for Bitcoin.
It was like
really
Bitcoin Twitter before
culture.
Bitcoin Twitter, kind of.
It was, yeah. It really was. It really did define Bitcoin culture for many years. And a lot of the stuff, the I just heard about Bitcoin, I'm here to fix it meme and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff
getting used a lot lately.
Oh yeah, especially on Elon. A lot of that stuff, it was developed in real time on Bitcoin Uncensored, and then exported to the world. And now I hear people repeating these things, and I think it's cool. It's had a long lasting effect on Bitcoin culture, and I don't think there's been anything quite like it, at least in terms of its effect. So, hopefully that remains. I think that we did set sort of the toxic culture that Bitcoin has, which I think has really kept Bitcoin pure and very free of a lot of the scams that these other coins have had to endure and seem to be okay with enduring, which I think is again, interesting.
I think I'm just thinking this out loud right now, but what Bitcoin Uncensored was for me, and I think maybe a good cultural theme for Bitcoiners in general, was like, it was just sincere. It was genuine. It was like, no matter how stupid or wrong or right or whatever, like everybody was just trying to experience Bitcoin like in the open with the clothes off, like that's what
Correct.
It felt like. and so it was honest,
yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's important because again, I think encountering a lot of the FUD that we see in Bitcoin right now, we're dealing with this energy FUD again, which we've seen for many, many years, and watching Bitcoiners freak out about it. I think Bitcoiners have a tendency to be very dishonest about the protocol and what's going on with it. Like the claim, for example, that Bitcoin uses renewable resources, it's complete bullshit for the most part. It really is not running on renewables. That's objectively false. And it always will be.
I'll tell you this. I don't know what's objectively true or false, so I think all of it is bullshit, so I don't even bother looking into it. And that's how I handle it.
Well, yeah, but like I'll make the simple argument. Like Bitcoin goes to where the energy is cheapest, and the energy is cheapest in places with subsidies. Real simple. So you have Bitcoin going into places like Niagara Falls, where they sell their Niagara energy to like New York cities, right? And the energy that comes off of the falls is very cheap, but the cities have limited amounts of that. So what will happen is miners will go into these cities, eat up the entire subsidy, and then the town from then on runs on like 11 to 13 cent per kilowatt hour electricity after the Bitcoiners eat it all up. And so net, there's a lot more energy used, but the Bitcoiners technically were running on renewable energy. And I think it's funny to watch Bitcoiners be on their back heels trying to defend it rather than kind of just making the argument like, okay, so what's your point? Bitcoin uses a lot of energy. It has to. There's no alternative.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but I do try to kind of bring these sides of things to the debate. But I don't get
I don't
so
follow
deep
anyone on
into
Twitter
the
these days.
details.
I got kicked off.
Yeah, I looked for you. I looked for you today. I was like, where's this account?
I got kicked off.
Yeah, I don't know. With the energy debate, like I mostly agree with you. I think that like a lot of, at the very least, a lot of the people that are kind of cheerleading these narratives for either side are definitely not verifying or researching these narratives and how true they may or may not be, or how technically true they may not be, which can be pretty important when you're talking about energy.
Well, I just don't think that Bitcoin needs to lie to win.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's what really bothers me. That's always bothered me. Like it was funny to me when people said that Bitcoin was not used for drugs. That was, Bitcoin Uncensored would go out and be like, yeah, okay, well, here's a drug user. How do you get your drugs? Oh, we use Bitcoin. Oh, I guess that is used for drugs. Okay, this is a hooker. What do you do? Oh, I use Bitcoin to list my stuff on back pages. Oh, interesting. Okay, Bitcoin was like dark world money, and it still is, and probably less so now, but it's hard to deny that that's what it was.
Well, it is, because it is the black market. It's like,
Correct.
there is no rules other than the rules in the Bitcoin protocol. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like literally the only place you can't make rules, so it is the black market.
Right.
I actually think the energy debate is like totally like a false premise anyway. Like,
Yes.
on many levels, like just the idea of like that we should like decide which energy is okay and which energy is not okay and how we buy it. Because it's like, once you've said, I'm going to sell coal energy, I'm going to sell, solar energy, like it's just a question of price, right? Like, and so if you start making a question of who or for what, like this is like regulation at a kind of granular level, which you can't actually enforce. Like you can't enforce how individuals use energy, which means you can't enforce any type of regulation in any special way. But
Yeah, well, I mean, I see that all the time. Like I saw it on Y Combinator the other day. Someone said we should ban proof of work chains, which I thought was a very funny idea.
Well, the other absurd thing is that like I don't know if I even believe that like there's such a thing as like more energy being used. And what I mean by that is like thermodynamically, there's all the same amount of everything all the time, right? So it's like if the miners are using energy to mine in a trend, like that means they're not doing something else they would have done. And so like what would they have done with their energy, or how would they have used energy if they weren't mining Bitcoin? Like they probably would have started storage farms, or who knows what they would have done, but they would have done something, right? And they would have done something to try to make as much money as they could, close to that situation. So like, I don't think you can actually like, it's like the whole like Bitcoin doesn't create evil. Like it's just because people do stuff with it doesn't mean that those things are newly happening because of Bitcoin.
Yeah, but they would have burned far less energy. I just find it uninteresting. Like,
maybe they would have burned more. Maybe they would have become coal miners, or literally,
sure.
Or,
but
like,
so
you
what?
have no idea. Right.
So
well,
what?
so what is the bigger
like,
point? But just in general, yeah, like, I don't know. It just seems like a stupid argument. And you're right. I think Bitcoiners should just be more honest and say, okay, yeah, Bitcoin is used for crime. Bitcoin is used for drugs, and it probably will be used for pedophilia and all these bad things, because it wouldn't actually be freedom technology if that weren't true.
Right. And again, you get to these libertarians and they go, Bitcoin's going to make everything hunky dory. It's going to make, wars stop. It's going to make criminals stop. It's just amazing tech. And you sit there like, no, it won't. It'll continue to be used for all of these things like criminals. It'll continue to be used for, all sorts of nefarious activity, and it'll be used for a lot of good stuff too.
So I guess we should take a moment and tell everyone that you also have a podcast, right? Junseth's World.
I do. Very infrequently, we release an issue, sometimes more frequently than others. We try to do every week, and that turns into like once every couple of months sometimes. But, we're over there, Junseth's World. It's soundcloud.com/Junseth's World. And, we got some good interviews, interesting stuff on there.
I don't listen to that many podcasts, but I do. I listen to yours about as frequently as any other. Like,
good.
I listen maybe once a month to a podcast episode these days.
Nice. So you're probably caught up.
I don't remember. I'd have to look at the latest episode and try to remember it. But your topics are always so like variety. So I'd have to.
Yeah, we tend to swing from topic to topic and just talk about stuff that interests us, and we're Bitcoiners, so everything in the world kind of relates back to Bitcoin.
Yeah. That's the fun part of being Bitcoin, is you can just make everything about Bitcoin.
Yeah. And again, it's not as frequent as like the old Bitcoin Uncensored, which was like, once to twice a week, depending on how, what we could do. But it's just our thoughts. It's me and a group of guys that are in varying stages of Bitcoining. Some of us have been around for a long time. Others have been around for less long. It's funny. I think Bitcoin Tina put it up today talking about how basically every single person that comes to Bitcoin has to follow the same journey no matter what. You can't really like jump over the journey. You have to shitcoin for a while. You have to experience all the exact same mistakes that every other person who got here made. And you will not listen to anybody as you're making those mistakes. You have to do them yourself. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and I've witnessed it now. I don't know. It seems to happen most often during bull runs when people come into the space. You get new people and they just start making the same mistakes, and it's very, very funny.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin kind of in a way attracts a type as well, or multiple types. Like there are certain kinds of people that are just more likely to put themselves in that position.
Right. Yeah. And I do wonder, when we have had enough people in the space for a while and have had enough people lose money in the space that they sort of consolidate. I wonder if that will happen or when. I do fear, one of my big fears here is that we end up with a lot of people putting a lot of money into these projects that end up being scams. And maybe they won't be figured out today, but they might figure it out in 5 years, 6 years, 10 years.
Well, that's the deep fear that kind of drives most of Bitcoin Twitter tweets, right? Like, they just want it's catcher in the rye syndrome. You just want to stop everybody from falling off the cliff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why Bitcoin maximalism exists, because so many people here have been, we've been through the fire. We've been burned. We've lost our money in Ponzi schemes. We've given our money to projects we thought were good. We realized we didn't understand mining or proof of stake or whatever the case it is. And we did things that were stupid.
And now we need you to buy our Bitcoin so we can get our money back.
Correct. Yeah. We're trying to pump our bags.
That's a joke,
that's been mentioned a number of times in Clubhouse.
But yeah.
What's interesting about Bitcoin is that all these other shitcoins people buy, and they buy for a profit, but in Bitcoin people hold, and they just only want to hold. They want to get as much Bitcoin as they can and hold it. And that's a phenomenally different use case than Ethereum or Monero or any of these others, which are essentially just transaction mediums, or in the case of Ethereum, it's pump projects, whether it's the DAO or whether it is, NFTs or ICOs.
Yeah, people get so excited about what's possible with networks and with the internet and with computers and with programming, and then they confuse discovering all of that stuff with discovering cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Ethereum is this masturbatory project filled with projects that are basically projects to fund other projects. And I find that very interesting as well, the fact that there really is nothing useful anywhere except Bitcoin. And I'm curious as to how long it will take people to realize that. I hope sooner than later.
So I want to come back around and talk about businessy stuff for a little bit.
Sure.
I want to do a kind of, I think, a case example. You mentioned Bitcoin wallets earlier, and you mentioned, we talked about Bitcoin businesses. Let's talk about bootstrapping and marketing and that kind of thing. Let's use a wallet as an example. What do you think, using your own expertise and recommendations, how would a Bitcoin business with an app or a product go about marketing itself effectively in the current internet environment?
I guess it depends on what.
Let's use the wallet app, I guess, because I know you have experience with e-commerce, and I'm trying to tap into that a little bit.
Well, if I were a wallet, I think that the wallet space is very crowded, and what I probably would do if I were developing a wallet would be, I would probably do it as an ancillary to another part of my business. If I ran Bitcoin ATMs, I'd have a lot of people with the opportunity to then, download a wallet, because they're going to get that receipt from the ATM and they're going to look at it and be like, well, what do I do with this? And the answer is, put it on a wallet. Well, what's a wallet? Here's the wallet you put it on. So, that's a pretty good use case, I think, for wallet development. And it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Again, you're not really monetizing the wallet in that sense. You're monetizing sales of your Bitcoin. But the wallet has some cool opportunities there too. I mean, I've always been amazed by wallet developers. I would think they would take a de minimis output or something like that from transactions. Maybe they can't. I don't know enough about wallet development, but I would think that would be something they would do, that you submit it to the chain. and
it's actually something.
for
It's
yourself.
not something they typically do, but it is something that actually Lightning makes actually possible. I don't think you could do it before, not trustlessly, but Lightning would make this possible by basically, if your channel is with the wallet company gets to set the first fee that you pay.
That's true.
So,
and I think they should set a small fee. I mean, I do think that wallets should be able to be a service that can, generate income. And I think in Bitcoin, it's difficult because like the easiest way to generate income in a wallet would be to show people advertisements. But I think that would be extremely unsafe and insecure and privacy violating. So, they've been reluctant to do that. So what a lot of them have done is they've tried to build these little marketplaces in their apps. I don't think that really works very well. So I think the wallet business is a really hard business. Yeah. And that's why I would say it should probably be ancillary to like an actual use case if you're running a business.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that having context for your products is like super important. And I think that a lot of Bitcoin businesses and businesses in this space in general, like they're a lot of times engineer led and they don't have like a lot of specific experience with marketing or product and these kinds of things. So they tend to have certain bents to how they do things.
Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of opportunity here. I mean, I think Casa Hodl is a great example of opportunity that exists. You'd think that someone would have come up with that entire business plan years ago, but they really didn't. And I think it's because it's so hard to understand how Bitcoin works. It's really difficult to get your mind around how seed phrases and seeds work. And it's just difficult to build a business like that. It really is.
So apart from like how the actual product and decisions about which product and the challenges of it, what about like what's going on in the internet and e-commerce world, just as far as like channels and advertising and approaches, guerrilla marketing? Like I used to be savvy in this kind of world, but I don't follow it at all anymore. Like as far as if I had a Bitcoin wallet and I wanted to advertise it and promote it and get people to bootstrap it, what kind of traditional means do you think are out there that actually would be appropriate?
I'd probably build a website that answers Bitcoin questions. And then
so SEO route, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's my expertise. I mean, you could certainly do like Google AdWords, but I'd probably have people literally just purchasing or like just coming to my site and making the site as useful as possible, and then trafficking that into the wallet. In wallet, I mean, I'm kind of amazed that more wallets don't do things like integrating with Coinbase or with these other exchanges. I think more and more have been doing that.
It's becoming a trend. Yeah. You're starting to see wallets. Well, at least you're starting to see exchanges have pet wallets, basically.
Yeah. I would have done that very early on. I probably would have used like affiliate marketing links and stuff like that to get people onto Coinbase and then encourage them to dump those coins into their wallet. That sort of thing would have been the thing that I think could have monetized wallets a little bit earlier. But a lot of them didn't really do that, and that's always kind of baffled me.
Do you include like any type of like support strategies for your SEO, like social media behavior, or like other aspects to it?
It depends on the business. Like I tend to believe that in e-commerce, you should let your business speak to you as to what the next step is. So there's a lot of businesses that do very well on Instagram. I know a guy down here. He started a fishing lure company. He built his entire reputation on Instagram. And then he launched his e-commerce site. The result is that he was able to translate those Instagram subscribers into actual buyers of his fishing lures. And he's doing phenomenally well as a result. So that business has an Instagram component. I don't think he has Twitter. He could probably do very well on YouTube. And that's generally like my strategy for business has always been, if you're going to start another channel, the channel needs to be unique, number one. And number two, it needs to have like a definite use case and ROI. So like I don't generally start social media channels for my company unless I have a very specific sort of methodology about going into that channel and actually turning that channel into a revenue generating engine.
It's interesting because like
or a cost lowering engine.
Yeah. Well, the default is like Twitter is everything to Bitcoiners. Like they think that all of Bitcoin happens on Twitter, and they don't. This is something that you can see a lot better once you actually work for a Bitcoin business that has actual customers. You'll see that most of Bitcoin Twitter is nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like I think the podcast space is huge in Bitcoin, and I think that's why podcasters in Bitcoin, they command absurd amounts of money for fairly small audiences. I think it's because Bitcoiners are very, very. It's a very targeted group.
Yeah, well, it's also very hard to target them. From working at Bitrefill, trying to do advertising and sponsoring and events and all the different ways that you could market the company and the products, is actually not that many that you're even allowed to. If you just mention cryptocurrency, and even the ones you are allowed to, it's inconsistent and they'll treat you weird. And
yeah. So I think that the podcasts provide a really good opportunity for getting the word out.
It's too much now.
Well, it depends on what your product is. You have to, Bitcoin's hard because you have to, in order to advertise, you have to have this product that's very valuable, or is going to attract basically every Bitcoin in the known universe, so that you can sell a lot of it, right? And there aren't a lot of those products.
There is kind of like a little reputational ladder you can climb though with Bitcoin Twitter, where basically if you can get a decent amount of followers and a decent amount of people that retweet you and listen to what you say and know who you are,
that's true.
You can suddenly get a job at a Bitcoin company doing their social media, and then you can you end up on their product team, and you end up with your own startup 5 years later.
Right? Is that you describing you?
A little bit. It wasn't intentional, but it started coming out that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, though. That's exactly true.
I mean, I wouldn't put it that way for me, mostly maybe a little bit out of ego, because I would say I do have actual skills and experience other than tweeting. And so I wouldn't attribute it to Twitter so much as that was definitely a good thing to, throw my weight against.
Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, Bell actually did a show with us. He followed us over to the Satoshi Roundtable #2, which we were not invited to.
Nobody calls me Bell, by the way. They don't even know you're talking about me.
Oh. What do you go by now?
I don't know. I mean, John or Bitcoin Error.
Your real name, Eric?
Nobody takes the time to call me my handle, and I don't see people in real life anymore. So.
Oh, that's funny. Well, okay. So Bitcoin Error Log or John went with us to the Satoshi Roundtable #2 as our cameraman. And there's a lot of things that happen there. I mean, we reported on most of it, but it's very funny to have been there and to hear, to kind of recount that, because there were really only 3 of us that kind of watched everything. We nearly got kicked out. The club didn't know what to do with us because we were members of the club. We had actually purchased memberships. I mean, it was all very funny. You remember when Bruce got so angry, he tried to kick us out. He had Rose go and report us to the desk.
When you say it, the pictures still go into my brain. I remember.
Oh yeah, it was they forced us to hand over a the SD card to them, but we had a second SD card. There was a lot of really funny stuff that happened there, and the Michael Turpin situation where he went to the bathroom and it took him 20 minutes to come back out. It was just a lot of fun. I miss those days. It was fun to go and, make trouble, but also do what I would consider fairly legitimate journalism.
Yeah, I basically agree with all of that. It was fun. I hope that other people are having their own kinds of experiences today in their own ways, with their own things. I doubt it with Corona.
I don't see it. Yeah. This whole situation with the energy FUD and Elon Musk has shown me that Bitcoiners really do take themselves too seriously right now. They really think it's important that people take Bitcoin seriously as a business opportunity or something like that. And Bitcoin, I think that this part's been lost, is that if you know more about Bitcoin than anybody else, you can show up in any room dressed like a clown in any way you want, even among bankers, and they have to listen to you. And you don't have to take it all very seriously. You can do anything you want, because if you actually understand this tech, then there aren't that many of you. And the other thing is, people will come around to Bitcoin eventually. Bitcoin is itself wearing a suit. You don't need to wear a suit on its behalf. And and it's just very funny to me to watch all these people try to like make legitimate, cogent arguments in favor of Bitcoin. The world needs Bitcoin. Bitcoin exists. It's going to eventually move toward Bitcoin, and you don't have to do anything about that. You can just laugh at people who don't get it yet.
Yeah, I guess if you have the catcher in the rye syndrome, though, you're not going to just laugh at people that don't get it yet. You're going to want to make sure that they don't miss the boat. And that may not be your job, and you're not a white knight or a savior, but that is what the justification a lot of people have probably for their behavior.
Yeah, but the more people you get on the boat, boat's not a great analogy, because the more people you get on the boat, the higher the boat floats. And if you truly believe that Bitcoin is sort of the one and only, spend your time stacking sats, spend your time getting as much of it as you can, and Barry Silbert will do the rest. He'll onboard the rest of the people for us.
Yeah, and that's not the best approach. I don't know.
Who cares?
I understand what you're saying.
You'll let Barry Silbert do that, and you can sit back and just get as much as you can acquire. It's a little bit greedy, but I just don't believe in Bitcoin evangelism, like it seems like most of the Bitcoiners do these days.
I think it comes down to like how much you really want to make your life in general about evangelism or the progress of man, or your role in that. Like if you're that kind, if I don't know what the word for it is, if it was religion, to be like a Jesus thumper, but like basically like an evolution thumper or something, like if you really care about the overall quality and progress of man, you're always looking to optimize everything all the time and complain about all inefficiencies. So I think there's a little bit of that underlying too.
I get that, but I've heard it said numbers of times, and I like the phrase, people will buy Bitcoin at the price they deserve. And honestly, you can't make them more deserving of it. They're going to do whatever they do, and they have to make the same mistakes every other Bitcoiner does.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just all games with words and projection and stuff. Like, there's no such thing as buying Bitcoin at the time you deserve. Like, it's not a real thing.
No, it is. The time you deserve is the time that you decide that Bitcoin is, the one that works. Like, I honestly,
that's like saying everything will happen to you the time that you deserve, and that life is.
That's correct. It's an obvious tautology, but it serves a purpose, and essentially, like, I don't know that it's a good thing to get Bitcoiners into Bitcoin before they've made all the mistakes, because then they make them while they're holding something actually valuable, and they're going to make the mistakes no matter what, right? They're going to keep all their coins on, some weird foreign exchange. They're going to.
So like, I don't disagree. Like, I'm anti-evangelism too, like as like something proactive, like, but I am pro. It's like, you need to pick up trash when you see it, right? Like, if it's on the ground.
This isn't Disneyland.
Well, Disneyland would be a bad example for what I'm saying anyway. Like, what I mean, it's like, if there's trash on the ground, it's because somebody else left it there. Somebody else didn't pick it up, and there probably isn't somebody else that's going to pick it up. If you see it there repeatedly, then that becomes even more true. So it's like, and if everybody leaves trash on the ground, you live in trash, right? So like, eventually somebody has to do something about it. And the only way to scale anything is if everybody does everything on an individual level. So like, you impose on other people with your trash. Kind of losing my train of thought here.
I get what you're saying. You're saying that if these shitcoiners go into the world, they're going to cause other people to shitcoin.
Well, not just that, but like, people losing money is a bad thing. Like, it's an inefficiency.
Yeah, but honestly, if you want to keep people from losing money, go find a Ponzi scheme in your backyard, disrupt a meeting, scream and yell, and do that. Like, that's an actual risk.
That's what people are doing, though, because what you're doing is you don't go around screaming at people to do things that you don't know anything about. And all these people in Bitcoin feel like they know a lot about Bitcoin, and so that's what
they do feel like it. And my frustration is that, like, when I go into these rooms and hear people talking about it, all they do is they repeat libertarian rhetoric, and it's very frustrating, because like, they come in with this understanding that like everybody's here because of sound money principles or something like that, and it's a bad assumption. But if you want to like go affect people in your backyard, go find a OneCoin or something like that and go to the meeting and let everybody know it's a Ponzi scheme. That's a highly risky thing for you to do, but that's actually going to change some people's lives versus like trying to stand athwart history, yelling stop in a way where they're going to shitcoin, they're going to go buy Ethereum, they're going to go buy these other shitcoins, and you're just sitting there kind of telling them they shouldn't do it.
Virtue signaling, basically, right?
Correct. Like what are you going to do? Like, okay, join my tribe. No, fine. Maybe you get a few people to do that. I think generally what you do is you just kind of, you're browbeating people into lying to you about the fact that they're not doing a thing that they're probably doing. Whereas like if you go to like, I don't know, a OneCoin type meeting, because here's the thing, Bitcoin confers a lot of knowledge. Like you can know a lot about Bitcoin, and the result of that is that you can look at OneCoin and know it's a scam. So you can go to a OneCoin meeting, you can disrupt it. You can go to like a BitConnect meeting locally in your area, you could have disrupted it. These are things that you could have done. And I think that it's on Bitcoiners to spend their time doing more of that kind of thing, standing up and letting, churches where a BitConnect meeting is going to happen know that they're hosting a Ponzi scheme, or showing up yourself and asking really hard questions. I think those are much more interesting ways to prevent people from losing their money than trying to get them out of Ethereum.
I think that's a good point, actually. Like local activism is much more effective than,
it's also more fun.
On Twitter.
Record it and put it on the internet, The death threats are also very funny. Like we did this to a OneCoin meeting, and the guy who arranged it spent the next week calling us and giving us hilarious death threats and telling us he was going to kill us and stuff. It was very, very funny. He's just an old man. He runs an ice cream shop locally. Like we knew exactly where he was. And it was one of the funniest things that it was hilarious. And I get a kick out of like hearing people like Andreas say that they get death threats all the time, and these other people that claim they get death threats. I just think it's very funny, because the only time I've ever received a death threat is when I disrupted a Ponzi schemer's meeting, and he sent me hilarious death threats. I literally can't take these things seriously. They're very funny.
I never got a death threat, but I've gotten about 3 violence threats.
Really? Yeah. And what did those look like? Like, I'm going to hurt you?
Oh, like I think the closest one I can remember was basically somebody saying like, "Don't come to this conference or you'll regret it," or something like this.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I wasn't going to the conference anyway, so it wasn't a factor. But it was, I've had a few people basically threaten that they would kick my ass, or that if they saw me they would fight me or whatever. But never funny. A death threat, and it's all from just been like totally owning somebody on Twitter. That's all it's been for.
Yeah, I do find Bitcoiners, I mean, like there's a lot of crazy in Bitcoin. And I do think it's funny to like listen to them, discussing money and whatnot. Like, I just think there's a lot of work to be done, in a lot of humility that needs to be gained in Bitcoiners, I think, generally, before they can really go out and talk about what Bitcoin is. Because Bitcoin is a deep subject that I think is largely philosophical and less technical. And I think that a lot of people don't spend the time to think deeply about the philosophy that makes Bitcoin and makes it interesting.
I agree. Like, I haven't been doing podcasts a lot the past year because I've been like in quote unquote stealth mode, but like I've been wanting to talk this way and kind of I feel like I've learned a lot about Bitcoin in private in the past couple of years, and I want to talk about it more and share it with more people. And it's all like stuff about the abstraction of Bitcoin and how things actually like work regardless of the technology. And I feel like,
right.
And like, so basically, like I reached this point where like some days I feel like, wow, like you really figured some of this shit out, and that was hard. It took you years. And then like within an hour, like there'll be something else. I'll be like, man, you are a fucking idiot. Like you don't understand shit. And I think that's the line you need to live on in Bitcoin. You need to try to stay on that line if you can. It's just between feeling stupid and being expert.
I agree. I mean, like Lightning Network's happening. I've spent a lot of time reading about finance generally and trying to understand the history of money and understand what makes money. Not from like a philosophical perspective, but reading Keynes and reading Hayek and reading all of the important people in finance. modern finance, reading as many books as I can about, why people trade, how to trade, what has built the modern economy. And now I'm just trying to, with Lightning coming in, I'm actually deciding, I was like, I should probably explore these sort of like esoteric finance topics in the West, like Islamic finance. I think that's a very interesting topic. And I think Lightning is probably, is a very interesting sort of foray into the topic of something like what I think it's called Hawala, and sort of the entire subject of like Muslim finance, which I think we have completely sort of ignored in the West and don't know much about, but which the entire East has run on for, centuries.
Yeah, I have a lot of these notes, but one of my notes is to do exactly that, to go and spend some time researching the, I don't know what the appropriate term is, so hopefully I don't say the wrong thing, but different types of like Asian and Middle Eastern finance that that are ancient, like Hawala and things like this. Again, forgive me if I'm using the wrong terms, but yeah, I think you were in the tweet thread when we were talking about that on Twitter once. That how Lightning Network compared to these networks that people used to use for money, and how there are some good things, probably some really good learnings about protocol design from how humans solve things.
Even more so, there's probably a lot of good opportunities in terms of understanding how to make money. In a system that's designed like that.
What roles
from
existed.
Centuries? Yeah, like how do you sit in the middle of transactions? Where should you sit in the middle of transactions? What makes transactions more or less efficient?
Well, yeah, this gets into the Lightning thing. Like you're talking about running Lightning and the idea of people like routing and running money, making money residually. And then I was bringing up how I think about Lightning's for business. And like, so yeah, like what is the real lesson? Like if we go back and look at history, maybe we'll learn where in between those lines is actually the correct design for how to trust somebody to like make money as a middleman in this situation.
What is the correct way to price Lightning transactions? All of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And I think that there's like a lot of opportunity in sort of understanding these like very esoteric pieces that we've never really ever understood or bothered to in America. And I think that that's a really cool thing when you see like an opportunity to understand something. I mean, Bitcoin is a technical thing, but you can understand Bitcoin also in a philosophical way. And there's a lot of philosophy that needs to be done on the subject of money and thinking about money. It's a very important topic, and it's very difficult to wrap your head around because most people think of Bitcoin exclusively technically. And I find that to be, it's not a problem, but it's just interesting that like people haven't figured out yet that there's a lot to be done just sort of in like philosophizing about Bitcoining and understanding like the topic of money itself. And, I think that's something that really lacks, not just here, but like, pretty much throughout the Bitcoin space.
So I'll use this as my last kind of topic since it's a bit weird, but like I'll give you what I think is like my current like most abstract understanding of Bitcoin, because I want to see what you think of it. So I think that Bitcoin is actually like a networked game, and it is like totally abstracted, just the concept of a game, and that all of the all of the addresses and such represent accounts and scores, and that basically the object of the game is to create one final transaction where all the Bitcoin goes to one person.
That's not wrong. That's I think you summarized a lot of things, including essentially what is the Byzantine general's problem, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting. I like that analogy.
The last part I'm not so sure about, like where all the money goes to one person, because it's not like really what you want is like this game to be in a perpetual state, right?
Well, I think this is what I mean. Like I've thought a lot about this, like the idea of a game that represents how a blockchain works. I mean, like I think it could be easily done on like a board game type thing, because yeah, it absolutely functions just like a game. I don't think that's wrong.
And because of all the narratives people use, they will never, I won't say never because I obviously think of it this way, but they will probably not ever think of Bitcoin in abstract ways like this. They will think of it
Correct.
as money, basically. Like, how do you ever talk about or even think about that Bitcoin might just be an abstracted network game if you're always talking about it being money? Because it's just scores. Like it's literally not money. Like it's just database numbers, right?
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny. You can have a whole Bitcoin conversation without talking about like sovereignty and the sovereign individual and, sound money and stuff like that. I think that that's foreign to most Bitcoiners.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that most Bitcoiners nowadays can. And I mean, you're an early Bitcoiner. I thought it was really funny. I'm going back to like the libertarians because they're so prevalent in the space right now. And they're such a fucking frustrating problem for me. I remember early Bitcoin, libertarians rejected Bitcoin. They were not here for a very long time, probably not until 2015-ish, 2014, 2015, because they all said that money or that Bitcoin wasn't backed by anything. And they were making that argument. Bitcoiner was not built on this notion of like libertarian finance. It was really built on, by geeks and people that were curious about the finance stuff. And then, there was smattered in there, a lot of discussion about money and how it should work in order to be like money. But there wasn't like this sort of overarching need to be a libertarian to think that the project was really cool. And I think that gets in the way of like thinking about Bitcoin an awful lot, these sort of preconceived notions that you bring to Bitcoin and wrapping it in sort of the veneer of your own biases and stupidities and not questioning your initial assumptions when you got here.
Yeah. That's why I brought that up, because I think that lack of humility denies you to be able to discover ideas like that. Like if you're always lying or compensating for what Bitcoin really isn't in a narrative, you're never really discovering what it really is.
I think that's true.
All right.
Probably a good place to end, huh?
Yeah, pretty good place to end. Thank you so much for your time. You have any like call outs or links or places you would like people to visit?
I mean, jump on, check out, I mean, it's not my project, but I've been using Get Umbrel, Umbrel's node. It's a really simple, neat little UI heavy node. If you want to try Lightning, a lot of people say it doesn't work, and a lot of people say that nobody's on it. They're not correct. If you want to listen to my podcast, I think I gave this out earlier, but soundcloud.com/Junseth's World, or I think you can get it on Apple Podcasts. I don't think it's been removed there yet. Junseth's World. I think that's about it. I don't think I have a lot of shout outs to give. It's a different world now. Nowadays, I just kind of like watch Bitcoin and go participate in like discussions, but it's different. In the BU days, it was every week talking about it, every waking moment thinking about it and sort of like, malleating it in our minds. And nowadays I just kind of get to watch. It's kind of nice.
You're like Bitcoin retired, right?
Sorry,
I didn't mean that in the money sense. I meant like in the social
like Bitcoin, more like the godfather or like a grandfather. Like I get to watch my kid grow up, and it's not like I built Bitcoin, but I do feel like I had a significant amount of influence on culture in Bitcoin, and in that sense, like I get to kind of watch it grow and do new things and crawl and poop for the first time. And I like that. I like that sort of like getting to sit back and watch it do its thing.
Are you going to the conference in Miami?
I am.
Cool.
Yeah.
I won't be there, but
well, hey, good. If you came, I'd kill you.
Good. Is that a threat?
It is a threat. Yeah. It's a death threat.
All right. Well, that's a good place to cut this off. Thank you for coming. We'll have you again sometime soon, hopefully. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Bill.